Announcing the winning tickets at approximately 2:30. Just go to the information tent, buy your ticket for £2 a strip, and potentially win yourself a ride on the Lancaster at 3 o'clock. An opportunity not to be missed. Of course, all of the proceeds from that go towards the continued upkeep of the Lancaster here, and in particular its ongoing return to flight, because that project is very much progressing. The scheme of restoration is underway with work going on. Now there's also the opportunity to look inside the cockpit of the Lancaster. That costs only £2 as well. You get looking through the flight engineer's window, and that's available from now until 12 noon. Now later on, once the majority, we hope, of the display aircraft have joined us, we've got flight line walks taking place. Your chance to get up close to the array of display aircraft out on the flight line, and it's already a very nice selection. There's plenty more to come. They'll be taking place from 12 until 1 today, and they're accessible from the crowd entrance at the red gate beside where the Mosquito is currently parked up. They are available for £2 donation per adult flight line walks between 12 and 1.
Yeah, that's the power.
Right, we've got to...
yeah, we're
Dad?
What?
I think you can get one by that one.
This year we thought we'll see if it works, but it gives people an opportunity to get a bit closer. So, and our maximum capacity is 5,000. So out of that, you don't get only because you don't have people trying to pay in the queue and just delay things. Then just basically just drove out. So this year, there's quite a lot of lions, but they're down here.
Performing again, I know they have a great following both here at East Kirkby and around the country. You do have another chance inside the hangar at 2:30 today. Just a taxi run just after 3 o'clock. That's the one you can still enter the raffle to win a seat on. Tickets £2 a strip from the information tent, and we'll read out the winning ticket number or numbers at about 2:30. Then following the Lancaster taxi run at 3:30, we get underway again with the flying with the Harvard, then the Miles Magister, the Auster AOP6, the Spitfire PR11, which we're now expecting will join us on slot and land afterwards. The Hispano Buchon, the Spanish-built Messerschmitt BF109, will not be landing here. It's operating out of Sywell in Northamptonshire today. Then we have the Westland Lysander, the Consolidated Catalina, and then the big finale, the dual taxi run of Lancaster and Mosquito for the first time in public. His event. The taxi rides continue through until the end of October, when the aircraft will once again enter the main hangar here and re-enter its restoration process. You can see the aeroplane. As the Lancaster continues to go through its paces, it seems like a good moment to grab a word with Andrew Panton, one of the leading lights, of course, of the Lincolnshire Aviation Heritage Centre. Andrew, very good to see you. What's the latest on the restoration to flight of the Lancaster?
Thank you very much, and very kind of what you said of me. The Lancaster is currently going through a 10-year restoration plan with 2 or 2.5 years into the plan. So we are looking at restoring the Lancaster to an airworthy condition. Currently, as you see, she's in a taxiing condition and taxiing very nicely as well. So we're basically breaking the aircraft down into its major sections and working on a major section each winter pier section. So that's the tail turret up to the rear door. And we aim to hopefully have that completely de-riveted, all shaped over and re-riveted from the start of November through to the end of April. So we have to try and fit all this work into a 6-month period during the winter period, so we can continue taxi runs like this during the summer period. And it's your kind attendance at this show which is helping to fund the restoration work. We have no external funding. All the money that's spent on the aircraft is raised for shows like this. We have a Rivet Club, which is an annual subscription paid each month, in which you get emails each week during the winter period and during each month during the summer period, and you really get kept updated as to what's happening with the winter restoration. The biggest money earner for the Lancaster to actually mean that we can afford the restoration of her is the taxi rides. So we have people today riding on board the Lancaster now, and they'll be riding on board the next 2 Lancaster taxi runs as well. They've all paid a fee, and that money goes towards the restoration of the Lancaster.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Andrew, and a big day for you because you'll be at the controls of a certain other taxiing aircraft later on.
Yeah, I'm very lucky to be given the opportunity to taxi the Mosquito. So we have Mike Chatterton taxiing the Lancaster, and I'll be taxiing the Mosquito this afternoon.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Andrew. for auction in a sale held at Blackpool's Squires Gate Airport. It didn't reach its reserve price in that auction, so went on to be sold to one. The 4 aircraft, followed by the first of 2 Fokker DR1 high-deckers, the triplanes, and then the Sopwith equivalent, the Sopwith triplane. So with this, we take a trip back in time, now in excess of 100 years, to the battlefields of the First World War. Nonetheless, they were thrust into some of the most intense aerial warfare the world has ever seen. This, the 2019 presentation by the Bremont Great War Display Team. Imagine you're standing in a trench on the British second line somewhere in the Somme sector, northern France, driving towards them a large group of aeroplanes. Off to the right we have the B-2C pursued by one of the Fokkers, off to the left the Sopwith Fokker triplanes. We're straight into an intense dogfight. It looks as though already the B-2C has taken a hit from its pursuing Fokker. PE stood for Blériot Experimental Military, was designed by Geoffrey de Havilland and built at the Royal Aircraft Factory from 1912. B-2A and B models was deployed early on to France in 1914. It was in the B-2B that Second Lieutenant William Rhodes Morehouse of the Royal Flying Corps became the first aerial recipient of the Victoria Cross for an attack using a single bomb on the railway near Courtrai station in Belgium, in which he was fatally wounded. The B-2C, after its introduction, became primarily used for artillery observation as well as for photo reconnaissance, for light bombing, patrol work, night fight missions against the Zeppelin airships, and so forth. The losses were grievous until it proved Allied fighters. Despite that, B-2Cs were still in RAF service after the armistice, largely as trainers. But look out straight in front of us now, the 2 different triplane designs, the Sopwith being pursued by the Fokker. And it gives us an idea of what the actual dogfights of the First World War must have looked like. In those days, we're talking dozens of aircraft engaged in close-in tail chasers. Today, fighter pilots speak in terms of beyond visual range combat. It wasn't like that between 1914 and 18. Multiple aircraft would be circling, climbing, diving, jockeying for position. Their pilots each seeking to get onto their opponent's tails. And that's what's happening now as the Fokker tries to get onto the tail of the Sopwith triplane. The Sopwith, the single-seat fighter with a single 6.303-inch Vickers machine gun. It was first flown in May of 1916 to service the following year with the Royal Naval Air Service. Its use on the front line was relatively brief, but it was very successful. Its rates of climb and of turn were better than its contemporaries. They started to be replaced in the summer of 1917 by Sopwith Camels, but the famed Black Flight, number 10 Naval Squadron, the Royal Naval Air Service scored a new 57 German aircraft built in 3 months with its tripes. Meanwhile, Fokker was developing its own version, the Fokker DR1, the Triplane, meaning triplane. It was first flown in July 1917, having largely been developed as a result of the excellent performance of the Sopwith triplane when it first appeared. Manfred von Richthofen. By the 2 Fokker DR1s. And lastly, the Sopwith triplane. This replica, Sopwith triplane, owned by Gordon. There have, of course, been many great Italian car designers, the likes of Pininfarina, Bertone and Giugiaro. Well, the aeronautical equivalent of those individuals is surely Stelio Frati. He conceived a number of extremely attractive light piston-engined aeroplanes during the relatively early post-war period. And when he came up with something rather more potent, as both a civil and military trainer and as a civilian touring aircraft, this was the result, SF in the SF.260 designation being his initials. The start, it was apparent that this aircraft was a winning combination. 260 horsepower from the Lycoming engine and this very attractive and very aerodynamically efficient shape. The first prototype flew in 1964. Today, it's the oldest production model of the SF.260 still flying. And it's an extremely practical, as well as very attractive and rapid aeroplane. A 4-seater with a range in excess of 1,100 nautical miles with the additional fuel carried in those wingtip mounted tip tanks. Its cruising speed is 180 knots and it's fully aerobatic, the airframe being stressed to +6 and -3 G at either end of the spectrum. As indeed do the Italians. was operated for several years by Stephen Stead, who also has a Spitfire and a Yak 3 that he displays, and this colour scheme was specially designed for Stephen. But in October 2014, it was bought by the current owner, Paul Freeland, who works as an engineer for Cosworth in Northampton. He started flying for his 40th birthday. Time on the likes of the Aero 83, the Beagle Pup, the Slingsby Firefly, and now the SF.260. He put the aircraft onto the British Register and wanted to come up with something suitably Italianate for the registration. So has come up with G-R-A-Z-I, grazie, his way of saying thank you to everyone who's helped him along the way with the acquisition and operation of this aeroplane and with gaining his display authorization. Impossible to underestimate the enormity of the effort Tony Agar has put in over the course now of more than 45 years to get this Mosquito NF2 into the condition in which we see it today. Indeed, it's absolutely become, he says, his life's work. It began with the location of remains of a Mosquito 16 used for civil defence crash rescue training way back in 1971. Ever since, Tony has scoured the world looking for Mosquito components and parts, and the result is now in front of us and taxiing for the first time at one of the East Kirkby Airshows, though it has, of course, undertaken taxi runs here at other events. The aircraft appears as a Mosquito NF2, finished in the colours of number 169 Squadron. Serial HJ711 in period managed to score number 169 Squadron's first kill on its new Mosquitoes at the end of January 1944, when the aeroplane shot down a twin-engined Messerschmitt Bf-110 fighter during a patrol west of Berlin. And last year, when this aircraft taxied for the first time, it became the first Mosquito to move under its own power in the UK since 1996. Since 2017, since when it's been fully returned to this taxiable condition. And while it may have been completed as a night fighter with the very distinctive aerials for the airborne interception radar mounted on the nose, recently, given that it's the 75th anniversary year of D-Day, Nick has had D-Day black and white invasion stripes applied to the aeroplane, which has now once again become a regular performer on the airshow circuit. Right, with the Beech 18 in the circuit to land, I've got the winning ticket numbers in the raffle. The top prize in which is, as I've been saying, a taxi ride aboard the Lancaster in its 3 o'clock taxi ride. Sorry for that interference there. The winning ticket numbers. The winning ticket numbers in the raffle. The top prize has been won by a yellow ticket, number 750. That's yellow 750. If you've got that ticket, you've won a place on the 3 o'clock Lancaster taxi ride. Second prize, a green ticket, number 850. Green 850. You've won the framed print. And the third prize, a peach and white ticket, number 719, you've won the iPad. So, all of those winners, please could you go to the information centre, the information tent, to collect your prizes, and to the recipient of the Lancaster taxi ride, we hope you have a very good time indeed. And thank you to all of the entrants into the raffle today, because of course all proceeds go towards the upkeep and restoration of the Lancaster, which in a few years' time will be in the air over East Kirkby. Nick Houghton then back on the ground with the Beech 18 3TN. Display of what she calls Twirlybatics. Relatively little power at this aircraft's disposal, 180 horsepower. The power to weight ratio is truly impressive and makes possible a display such as this, running in from our left. A quarter roll in the vertical. And pulling through. And rolling on the downline once more to recapture the main A-axis. That's the axis parallel with the main grass runway. When we talk about the B-axis, it's the one at 90 degrees onto that. Corinne says that building this aircraft involved using a wide variety of skills she hadn't used before. Metalwork, woodwork, fabric covering, work on the electrics and so forth. But she doesn't do this professionally. She runs a small business back home in Cornwall, specialising in clothing for cyclists. And flying aside, she enjoys rowing, motorbiking, cycling and walking around Cornwall. into an inverted pass right the way down the line. Corinne coming in from the other end. And very nicely handled indeed. this aircraft was the end result, the North American Harvard. The first production model was dubbed by the US Army Air Corps of the day as the BC-1, and that was supplied to the RAF as the Harvard Mark I. It was quite a different design to what we see here. It had a rounded off tail fin and wingtips and a fixed undercarriage. But soon, production for the US Army Air Corps switched to the advanced trainer derivative, the AT-6, and the design as we really know it today was born. The RAF and the Royal Canadian Air Force bought the AT-6 as the Harvard II. Another main producer of the Harvard in Canada was a company called CCF, Canadian Car and Foundry. And it was that firm that built this particular example, which is Harvard 4, produced in 1951, and it served with the Italian Air Force. Went into civilian hands 30 years later, and later had a bit of a film role when in the late 1980s it served as a prop in the making of the movie Empire of the Sun, directed by Steven Spielberg, playing the part of a crashed Japanese Mitsubishi Zero fighter. Nearly 15,500 examples of the T6, the AT6, the Harvard, or the SNJ as it was known to the US Navy, were produced in total, and they carried on being very useful post-war, including on the front line. They served as forward air control aircraft with the US Air Force in the Korean War of the early 1950s. The RAF flew them as light strike aircraft against communist gangs in Malaya. A very nice display indeed from Mark Bennett with the CCF Harvard 4 from T6 Harvard Aviation. And now we move from the advanced to the basic phase of RAF training during the Second World War. With more monoplane fighters and bombers coming into service as the RAF expanded in the run-up to impending war, the service needed a monoplane trainer to better prepare pilots for the demands of such machines of the day. Against that, the all-wooden construction of the Magister was perhaps something of an anachronism. There are some interesting features of this design. The rear windscreen is larger than the one at the front to accommodate the blind flying hood used for instrument flying training, which will be pulled forward over the rear cockpit for that rear view mirror, so the instructor could see where the student was looking. That, of course, particularly useful in the crowded circuits near the training bases of the day. The first Magisters came into RAF use with the Central Flying School in September 1937, and then they started serving with the elementary flying training schools, superseding initially the Avro tutor. But the Tiger Moth was still so well established that it went on to dominate RAF training. Even though on the face of it, the monoplane Magister was a more suitable modern design, so just under 1,300 Magisters would go on to be built. But had German forces mounted an invasion of the UK in 1940, some of them would have been on the front line. The other four in the UK. This one was built in 1940, went into civilian hands in 47, permanently withdrawn from use in 1960 with a private owner in France. It's been with the Real Aeroplane Company and based in Britain ever since. That was before the Air Ministry set eyes on the type and earmarked it for the new Air Observation Post, or AOP, role. This was a vital function during the Second World War, providing the over-the-horizon targeting capability required by artillery guns. All 22 of the surviving Taylorcraft Plus Cs that were still extant were impressed into RAF service in 1940. And the Air Ministry went on to order 100 more of the new, more powerful Plus D variants. While they were being built, the decision was taken to give the aircraft a new name for military use, and they chose the name Auster, a Roman word meaning a warm southerly breeze. The Taylorcraft Plus D became the Auster Mark I, which in 1942 entered service with number 651 Squadron. These aircraft would accompanied the ground forces operating very close indeed to the front line. They were able, of course, to fly from often very small and unprepared airstrips. All of these attributes saw to it that the Auster family was developed through successive versions for the RAF and later for the Army Air Corps post-war. This is a post-war model, an Auster AOP6 with 145 horsepower de Havilland Gypsy Major engine. And AOP6s such as this served with the RAF during the Korean War of 1950 to 53. And also off back home to his base near Blackpool will be Peter Troy Davies with the Calidus autogyro of gyro air displays. An example of what is, of course, perhaps the most famous Royal Air Force fighter of all time, but we see it today in its photo reconnaissance guise. This particular aeroplane, 75 years old this year. Built at Supermarine's factory at Aldermaston in Berkshire in mid-1944. This Mark was designed to operate at altitudes in excess of 30,000 feet in its photo reconnaissance or PR role.
the Spitfire display coming up. The entry for the 6th of June 1944 reads, "The great day at last, D-Day." Even though from the tempo of things recently, the squadron has been saying to themselves any minute now, it was still a surprise, except for the CO, whom we suspect had a clue. The weather was most unkind. Out of 16 sorties, only 4 were high level. A lovely display by the boss of the Hangar 11 collection, Peter Teichmann, with his Spitfire PR11. Left is one of them, operated by Air Leasing on behalf of its owners, Anglia Aircraft Restorations. This aeroplane was designed to meet a 1934 specification for a new Army cooperation aircraft. Westland met it with this extraordinary looking machine, RAF aircraft to leave France for England. But many more heroic deeds in the Lysander's history were to come. In 1940, Lysanders flew many patrols of potential invasion areas along the south coast of England. One of the pilots who flew those missions I mentioned earlier, Ken Wallace, later famous for his autogyros, he was in service with number 268 Squadron at RAF Westley. Wallace told me the only job we were doing at that time was taking off before dawn, flying round the coast over the sea and rattling out on the Morse code every 10 minutes, NMS, no movement seen. We fully expected that we were going to see the invasion on its way before they could pick it up on the ground radar. Thankfully, perhaps, that never came to pass. In the UK, Army Cooperation Command squadrons started replacing their Lysanders with Curtiss Tomahawks in 1941, but by then other roles had been found: air sea rescue, target towing, and most famously, supporting the Special Operations Executive. Those aircraft were fitted with an access ladder and a long-range fuel tank. They dropped agents into Nazi-occupied Europe and recovered them from that territory, making full use of this type's outstanding short takeoff and landing capabilities. They operated into small landing sites at night, lit by nothing more than moonlight and a few torches put there to mark the strip by members of the French resistance. This is the only Lysander still flying to have been built in Britain. There are 3 others, including 2 of them in Canada, all of which were built in Canada. Served with number 225 Squadron at Tilshead, near Warminster in Wiltshire, patrolling along the Hampshire coast and the Isle of Wight. That was when a 15-year-long restoration by the Aircraft Restoration Company at Duxford was completed. And it was finished in its number 225 Squadron colours from 1941. Went on to be awarded a posthumous Victoria Cross. Squadron Leader Graham Stewart, AFC DFC, who flew this aircraft regularly on number 225 Squadron, visited Duxford and touched the controls her father operated in wartime. an exhibition of pure elegance in display flying from the boss of the aircraft restoration company, John Ray. Among the feats of these aircraft during wartime was the occasion when PBYs of the US Navy spotted the Japanese fleet beyond range. Catalinas came into RAF service with units stationed in Northern Ireland in 1941, and it was only that May that they achieved their first major operational success. That was in connection with the hunt for the German battleship Bismarck, which was shadowed by a Catalina from number 209 Squadron until naval vessels came back into the ship's vicinity. RAF Catalinas also covered the North African landings operating from Gibraltar, and in rather different climes, they've protected supply convoys flying from a base near Murmansk in the Soviet Union. Was another Catalina of number 210 Squadron that carried out Coastal Command's last sinking of a German U-boat. It occurred northeast of Sullombo on the 7th of May 1945, one day before World War II in Europe ended. More than 4,000 of these aeroplanes were built between 1937 and 1945 by many different factories, not just by Consolidated, but also, like this one, by Canadian Vickers, by Boeing, and by the Naval Aircraft Factory. And they carried on in service post-war. The US Air Force used OA-10A Catalinas in the air sea rescue role in the Korean War. Was also shot down by MiG-15s over the Baltic. The Swedes dubbed it the Catalina incident, rather than the C-47 incident. This example, of which the wingtip-mounted floats have just been lowered, is 75 years old this year. It has a very varied history. It took in service with the Royal Canadian Air Force, with various operators as a firefighting water bomber, and then, in 2002, acquisition by a company called Catalina Aircraft Limited for operation by plain sailing at Duxford. Since then, it's been painted in the colours of an OA-10A rescue Catalina from the US Army Air Forces, specifically from the 5th Emergency Rescue Squadron, stationed at Halesworth in Suffolk during the dying weeks of World War II. as one of those recently fledged Catalina captains, handling the aircraft so well for us today in the form of former Indonesian bush pilot turned Pilatus PC-12 executive turboprop pilot Matt Dearden, joined by co-pilot Gareth Bliss. They'll be heading back to Duxford fairly soon, having picked up some of their ground crew. Meanwhile, we're going to be getting the Harvard of T6 Harvard Aviation out back to Duxford as well, before we move on with the grand finale to today's airshow. And here goes Matt Dearden and crew in the Catalina on departure. And with the wind being rather fickle at this point in the afternoon, Mark Bennett has also decided to switch ends for departure in the Harvard, and he'll be following the Catalina on.
They must have some. Let's see. Help me!
That's a newly hatched one.
Yeah, 4 weeks to know.
First air show, I like to say.
I'm not showing a lot of interest, so I can't understand it.